Oh, so are you excited to come to Norwalk?
I certainly am. I'm looking forward to it. March 22nd there at District Music Hall. I'm looking forward to meeting true crime fans and sharing my expertise with serial killers.
So, how exactly did you get into serial killers?
Well, I did it actually a sort of an unexpected way. My background for the first 20 years of my career, I was involved in the media and entertainment world in television. And I worked for a number of years actually at NBC Television Network. And I was involved there with the news operation. And I saw how certain cases just became larger than life. And I'm talking about things like O.J. Simpson, but also Jeffrey Dahmer, one of the most notorious serial killers of all time. And I became really fascinated by that and why we, the public, are riveted to these individuals in these cases. And then later on, after 9/11, I was still in New York City. And like a lot of people, I had sort of a soul searching time after 9/11. And I decided to go back and pursue a lifelong interest of mine, which was criminal justice and criminology. So I initially got a master's degree in criminal justice studies and then a PhD in criminology. And I decided to explore this phenomenon now that I was a social scientist. So I started reaching out to serial killers themselves to talk to them about their identities, and many of them actually are aware that they are public figures, and their grandiosity actually demands attention. Guys like David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, he gave himself his own name, and Dennis Rader, who called himself Bind, Torture, Kill, because that's what he did to his victims. He gave himself his name and actually demanded that the newspapers in Kansas cover him and give him additional publicity. So I come at it from the psychological and sociological perspectives of the criminals themselves, but then I'm also fascinated by the media's attention to it and why these individuals become what I like to call celebrity monsters.
Okay, so what inspired you to create a live theatrical event about serial killers? And
It
and how does it differ from other true crime discussions?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a culmination of my experience throughout my entire career. As I said, I spent more than 20 years in the media, entertainment, advertising world. So I saw firsthand how real life serial killers were portrayed in the news and entertainment media. But then I also saw the fictionalized portrayals of serial killers. For example, Dexter or Hannibal Lecter in The Silence of the Lambs, these iconic figures. And so I bring that to the table, this sort of sociological and cultural look at serial killers. But then, as the PhD in criminology that I am, and having interviewed and gotten inside the minds of some of the most diabolical characters of all time, I bring that to the show as well. So it's a multifaceted um, educational, informational, and entertainment opportunity is what I'd like to call my show. And so it definitely has high information value, but it has high entertainment value as well. And I how it differs from any other true crime live event would be my own personal experiences and my own journey to get inside the minds of some of these most diabolical individuals. I spent years corresponding and getting inside the mind of David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, perhaps no one more notorious in the 20th century among serial killers than him. And the same thing with Dennis Rader, BTK. So I have unique insights into their pathologies, into their horrific desires and hungers that led them to kill. But then, as I said, I also put this in a cultural context. So we see how these individuals have actually become these rather iconic individuals that they have. Because if you say to someone, what is evil in the world? It's not unlikely that the name David Berkowitz or Dennis Rader or Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer will come up. So they are actually like symbols of evil and monstrosity in our in our culture.
So, how has society's views of serial killers changed over the decades? And do you think the media portrayals contribute to the change in perception of them?
Well, yes, I would say yes, yes, and no. On the one hand, the because of the efforts of the behavioral science unit in the FBI, the I'm talking about the early, really like OG profilers, as I like to call them, the forefathers and foremothers of all this, and that includes individuals like John Douglas, Bob Ressler, Ann Burgess, and a very good friend of mine who passed away a few years ago, Roy Hazelwood. These are the folks who really pioneered profiling, and they helped us to understand them. So they brought a much more profound and nuanced and complex understanding of serial killers since the 1970s, as they got inside their minds and also understood their behavior. And because before the 1970s, serial killers were pretty much just lumped together with other mass murderers, or individuals like public shooters that we think of today. And there was no detail or nuance to understand the differences between them. So yes, that those things have been portrayed in the media, including Clarice Starling, going all the way back to Silence of the Lambs, her portrayal of the FBI profiler student who was studying Hannibal Lecter, that went a long way toward people understanding the evolution and the development of profiling, and certainly the Mindhunter series on Netflix, which I would say is one of the best things, if not the best thing that I've ever seen, that is a dramatization of real life. It is fictionalized to the extent there are actors and so forth, but it's really close to reality. And I know this because I'm very friendly with the developers of the books and the series. And so there is, at the same time that there has been, and certainly, a sophistication and an educational process that has come through the media, there's also the maintaining stereotypes and caricatures and fictionalized depictions that really do an injustice. And what I'm talking about is, you know, things that are as far fetched as Freddy Krueger, the Nightmare on Elm Street, or Michael Myers, the serial killer in the Halloween franchise. Technically, these individuals are serial killers, but they're like these super predators that just have no basis in reality. And for that matter, even Hannibal Lecter, the fictionalized serial killer, while he may be based on aspects of real life serial killers, there's never been an evil genius super predator serial killer like Hannibal Lecter. So some of these fictionalized accounts actually do an injustice and make the serial killers seem more superhuman than they really are. And then also, I have some, uh, I would say, criticism of the news media, the way that they portray real life serial killers. There's this tendency to do what we in social science call reductionism, which is you take somebody like a Jeffrey Dahmer, who was compelled through sexual lust to abduct, to defile and abuse, sexually abuse, and then kill, dismember, cook, and even eat his victims. That's so incomprehensible that what the news media tends to do is just reduce it to evil. They don't know what to call it, so they just reduced him to caricatures like vampire, like Dracula, monster, evil. They even called him the real life example or the real life depiction of Hannibal Lecter. In fact, this is interesting. It came out in the same year. Hannibal Lecter came out in Silence of the Lambs, the film, in January of 91, and Dahmer was arrested that summer. So in the media, in the news and entertainment media, Dahmer became the real life Hannibal Lecter. So fact and fiction became conflated and became essentially the same thing. And that is one of the dangers of over sensationalizing these individuals and stereo and providing stereotype and stereotypical depictions of them in the news and entertainment media.
Yeah, I mean, and I know that many people believe that all serial killers are very specific profiles. They tend to say that they're white, male, and motivated by sexual impulses. What
Mm-hmm.
are some of the biggest myths about serial killers that you'd like to debunk?
Well, that's a big part of my show, by the way. One of the things that I like to do on stage is address these various myths and break them down and provide reality. Because I think one of the strengths and one of the benefits of coming to my show is to get a real sense of reality when it comes to serial killers specifically and murder and true crime in general, because there's many stereotypes out there, and you mentioned several of them already. Serial killers are not all young, white, dysfunctional males like the caricature Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs. I often hear that. Aren't they all like that? Don't they all look like Buffalo Bill and act like that? No, no, they do not. Serial killers come in every race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, education, IQ, across the board. And the only thing, and there is just one common denominator, the only thing that all serial killers do have in common is the fact that for them, the killing of complete strangers comes to satisfy this internal psychological hunger that becomes almost like a visceral craving over time. It builds and it escalates, often starting around puberty and then through the teens and into the early 20s. And it's borne out and fueled through fantasy and sometimes pornography and sometimes through harming animals and even starting fires, things like that that escalate and fuel this internal frenzy until only the killing of a complete stranger will satisfy that hunger. And it often happens around the early to mid 20s. And so it can take 10 years, it can take 10 to 15 years for this to build up inside in a fantasy way until it has to be acted out in real life. And so that is truly the only thing that serial killers have in common. And the exact nature of the fantasy need, what compels them, what hunger they have, varies by serial killer. And it's actually rarely sex. It's maybe 15 to 20% of the time is it sex per se. It can be a need to dominate, control, and destroy other human beings. It can be a need to extinguish a certain group of individuals that this killer finds reprehensible or unnecessary. And I'm talking about categories such as sex workers or homeless people or individuals of a certain religion or sexual orientation. And there have been serial killers who have done that. And there are also serial killers who believe that they are marching to the orders of some external higher power like God, Satan, the man in the moon, or Ronald McDonald, who tells them to kill. David Berkowitz, the son of Sam, believed that Papa Sam, Satan, was compelling him to kill. So that's one of the biggest myths is that they're all the same. And another one is that they want to get caught. They don't want to get caught. They love killing more than life itself. They can't get enough of it. And actually, the reality of killing, they have told me, serial killers have told me this, that the reality of the killing is not as powerful as the fantasy of killing, which is why it becomes like an addiction that they have to keep coming back to and kill again and again, trying to achieve the ultimate high.
I know a lot of your research explores the fantasies and compulsions that drive serial killers, and obviously you're an expert on it. Is there ever a point where intervention could stop it?
Well, once they have that taste for blood, and I mean certainly after by the time they commit their first murder, the train has left the station, so to speak, and there's no turning back. Could there be an intervention early on? Because many of these individuals, something is awakened inside of them around puberty. 11, 12, 13 years old. Something is awakened, a lust inside of them. And I don't mean a sexual lust. I mean a craving, a hunger that whereby they're excited by blood and hurting people and torture and torment. And if that can be recognized, and it will play it out itself out sometimes by simply even things seemingly as benign as excessive teasing in school, and certainly hurting animals, if that is witnessed in a child, or callous behavior where they seem to enjoy the suffering of other children. If that can be recognized early on, I do believe that an intervention can take place. And even more so, a psychopath is born with a brain that is incapable of normal empathetic connection and emotional connection. And as a result, it's very difficult for a psychopathic child to express any sort of emotion because they just can't feel it. What happens is, as they get older, they learn to mimic it. They watch other people and they learn to mimic emotional behavior because if they're going to function in society as a human being, they have to learn how to do it. But little children don't know how. So if you have a young child, and I'm saying this to school teachers as well as parents and guardians, if you have a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old, an 8-year-old who simply doesn't seem to manifest the right affect. They don't seem to respond appropriately to either sad things, tragedy, or for that matter, joyful things. That can be a potential red flag. And once again, proper intervention could possibly cut that off at the pass.
No, I don't want to give away too much of your show, so I'll stop asking questions because I have tons. But for those that are attending your show at the District Music Hall here in Norwalk, what can they expect from the experience?
Well, it's going to be an exciting, chilling, and thrilling multimedia experience. And my show consists of two acts. Act number one is where I take the audience inside the minds of some of the most diabolical characters of all time based upon my actual experiences. And I explain the differences between certain concepts, important concepts like sociopath and psychopath. I explain why serial killers rarely are able to use the insanity defense when they are caught, and they are also rarely clinically mentally ill. And that is because psychopaths and sociopaths are not clinical mental illnesses, and they're not legally recognized as such as well. And in the second act, one of the highlights is where we do a live Q&A session. And I do in a rapid fire fashion. I take as many questions from the audience as possible and attempt to answer them. And it often takes on a local flavor because people will have questions about, regional or local predators, serial killers. And it's all questions are free game, so I never know what people are going to ask, and it provides a really interesting experience up close and personal to ask these questions. And I've also incorporated a few technological elements, new technological elements that will allow me to recreate and actually share direct conversations with serial killers from the stage. And I'll just put it at that. It's a little teaser, but it's new technology, and it seems to really be grabbing people's attention and excitement.
If they miss you at the district hall, and where's your next place that you're going to after this?
Well, actually, the following night on the 23rd, I'm going to be in Boston at the Wilbur Theater, but I have about 35 more shows coming up this year, and the best thing to do is if you're listening from another area or you want to see where I'll be performing later, you can go to my website, which is docbonn.com. I'll spell it out, DOCBONN.com. And there is a comprehensive list of dates and cities for the rest of the year where I'll be performing.
And then if viewers come and see you and they just don't get enough, do you have like a podcast or a book or anything like that?
Yeah, I do have a podcast that you can link to. It's called An Hour to Kill with Doc Bonn, and you can link to that from my website. I have a best-selling book, which is Why We Love Serial Killers: The Curious Appeal of the World's Most Savage Murderers. There's a link to that also on my website, and I do frequent blogging and articles for Psychology Today as well.